back, ladies and gentlemen, and allow me to welcome here in the studio Dr. Mousa Shehada, senior political analyst and former president of the Arab American Congress for Palestine. Thank you very much for coming in tonight. Always, we have also with us Mr. Sharif El-Helwa, political analyst. Thank you very much for coming in. Dr. Mousa, let me start off by asking you, obviously we wanted to know, since we're talking about Donald Trump tonight, your overall predictions for his foreign policy.
It's very easy to predict because predictions usually somehow is related to the past, and the past has been very shameful for the United States in general since 1948 up to now. There is no question about that, and I don't think I'm exaggerating when I say the United States has been consistently supporting Israel, right or wrong. There's no question about that. Right or wrong, they're supporting it. Imagine even in the last episode whereby Mr. Trump is asking Mr. Obama to even use the veto. And what happened after the resolution, Israel, with all due disrespect for logic, they say it's a shame that the United States has abstained. In other words, what he's telling me, it's a shame to stop a robber and a thief from stealing land. It's a shame. You should not stop a robber from stealing land. That's the logic I understand from it. Because what is there is shame in asking the Israelis to respect the law, respect international law, respect international legality, and implement it. I'm not thrilled about the so-called resolution because the question is not a resolution, the adoption of resolution by the United Nations. So many resolutions have been, tons of them have been adopted by the United Nations, but how many of them were implemented? Right. That's the question. It's question number two that occurred to me after 68 years of devastating failures of the foreign policy or even of the United Nations in implementing the laws. They're still not doing anything about anything, because if I were them, at least I will use what is called Chapter 7, whereby it could be implemented like they did in Iraq. They're not going to do that. Right. So, is it a political victory? Yes, in the sense, finally, the Security Council recognizes the Palestinian rights to the land that had been uprooted from in building this expansion of these settlements. Yet, still, the frustrating question is, so what? When are they going to implement it? Will it be implemented? Could it be implemented? And the Israelis' adamant position of rejecting practically anything that deals with demanding the Israelis to abide by what is called international legality, and they're not going to abide by it.
Right. Even with your expressed frustration, there is even more frustration of how the future of a two-state solution could look like under Donald Trump. He has already said that he will try and move, or will move, the U.S. embassy to Jerusalem. He has also said that he will not pressure Israel in any way, shape or form to sit down for negotiations to a two-state solution. So how do you see the peace process at all under a Trump administration?
Let me assure Trump he's not going to have a big problem demanding the rejection of what is called the two-state solution, because there is not enough land to build the other state. What are we talking about? We're talking about Israel that has almost taken over from 88 to 90% of the land of the West Bank from 1948 up to now. They're over almost very close to 89% of, we're talking about historic Palestine from the Nile River to the Mediterranean. Or they almost have, what's left? What's left are pockets of Palestinians' presence connected by roads which are controlled by Israelis. Now, what kind of a miracle is there that can create a Palestinian state when it is so dissected into this pattern? So, the job for Mr. Trump is not too much, actually, because he will simply accept the status quo, and that should be enough. Right. Because anything above the status quo, I mean, I remember I was on TV show one time in the United States when I was asked, you Palestinians have to give more concessions. I said, tell me what is there to concede for?
Right.
What is left for us except to pack up and leave, really?
Right.
There's nothing left.
Right.
So that's why I'm not that much optimistic, because I think the Palestinian leadership has let go of a very, very, very important weapon in achieving the rights of people all over the world. I'm talking about history, is that they should have never thrown the gun away. They should have continued resistance.
Right. If I go to Mr. Sharif and ask him how you see foreign policy under the Trump administration, some have said he will be more, if you will, aggressive, and others have said the United States is going to be more isolationist. Which view do you think is going to take?
Well, we have to think about Trump as a servant of the public. He's the president of the United States. His interests are the interests of the United States before his own interests. He's known to be a maverick. He's a businessman, and he has always put pressure, propaganda. He used to be an actor. He's more of a political chameleon. So for him right now, he wants to establish the global peace that Obama administration have set as a platform for him to work, or for any president that would have come, whether it was Hillary Clinton or him. So right now, Israel is trying to make peace with all its neighbors. They have bigger visions. They want to have economic collaboration with Egypt, with Saudi Arabia, with Jordan, with other countries, Venezuela, all these, Cuba. You travel anywhere in the world, you find Israelis. So for them right now, Palestinian problem has to be resolved.
Right.
There is a conflict now. Netanyahu is really against it. There has been so many statements that they want peace with Palestine, but it's not the right political time. There's so much they have to do before they declare there's peace with the Palestinians.
So is it a problem with the current administration, you think?
Yes.
Right.
It's Netanyahu, not the Israelis, not the people on the street, not the Jews you meet everywhere in the world. They want peace, they want economic collaboration. They are tired of having this conflict. It's had been ongoing for a long time.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, if we look again, because the whole topic of today's discussion is Donald Trump, and obviously when he comes into office, there's going to be what he has said, new foreign policy that finally learns from the mistakes of the past. Now, you can say that will have him move more towards Russia and away from sort of, again, an aggressive stance or a more, or move inwards and become a more isolationist country that doesn't get involved in other countries' problems.
The platform has already been set.
Right.
They don't really need to communicate with the outside world physically anymore. Like, let's say China, for example.
Right.
China is dependent on its exports. Who are the main importer of Chinese products? The Americans. About 40% of Chinese economy is dependent on the imports of Americans from China. The same with the Middle East. There is no reason actually to have foots on the ground and stations and physical military presence, because anyway, whether it's Jordanian military, Saudi military, Egyptian military, they will have to collaborate with the US military to buy weapons and have consultants coming over here to consult and give training, etc.
Right.
So there is no reason to have politically physical presence in the region.
Right. Okay, let me ask Dr. Mousa how you see his foreign policy in general once he takes office. Do you see him changing much? Do you see him becoming a more aggressive, sort of George Bush-style diplomacy? Do you see him becoming perhaps a more isolated? You see America becoming a more isolationist country? How do you think it's going to work out?
First of all, I would like to dismiss the idea of becoming an isolationist, because they're not going to leave the world open for the Russians. I mean, there is a Cold War, and the Cold War stopped actually, or subsided a little bit, because the United States have won so much influence in many other countries ever since. But now I think the Russians are trying to come back to the scene and see if they could be recognized as such. Therefore, to withdraw into isolationism means that you are giving the green light for the Russians to expand in the same areas where the United States was. However, I do not expect a dramatic change of, shall we say, the foreign policy when it comes to the Middle East, not from Trump.
Right.
Trump lives in New York, which is the majority of Zionist leadership lives, and where they have nice control over the, including the mayor, who has said things more than what the Zionists actually demanded. So no, I do not expect it will be a very huge, shocking surprise to the world if Mr. Trump, for instance, come up tomorrow and say, look, we need to implement United Nations legitimacy or legal process on the problem. He's not going to come up with something like this. Mm-hmm. It's expected. Don't forget, in a democracy, it is not the president who makes a policy. He has certain powers. He has certain vetoes sometimes on the Congress. However, the policy is already set for him before he comes. And when I hear that the ex-mayor of New York became one of the people in the cabinet who was more of an ardent Zionist, I do not expect much of a change when it comes to that. The puzzling part is that, I mean, if I were them, I'd tell them, look, even if we all hate the Palestinians, we love the Jews, and we love the Zionists, and we love Israel. But if you love them so much, can you explain to me why for the last 68 years, this beleaguered nation, according I put quote unquote, has not achieved peace?
Right.
Is that what you guys want, to have it always suffer? They don't understand history, nor do they understand human nature. No oppressed people in the world will remain under oppression forever. They will always wait for the chance to repel the oppression in order for them to become free. Freedom is such a noble and sought after objective that not many people are going to ever simply let go of it without striving for it. Even though I myself have criticized Mr. Abbas, who has chose a road of peaceful negotiations with the Israelis. And I think I'm quite sure most people know that most negotiations, not only have they failed, but they have actually, at the time of every time there was, when negotiations are finished, you hear about a new adventures of the Israelis into Palestinian land, taking over the land, uprooting, damaging the streets, etc., damaging the trees, and taking over the land. And this is so much so. I remember actually in Annapolis, if you remember, Mr. Olmert then was the premier of Israel. He signed with the co-signer of the United States even, guaranteeing that they're going to liquidate any future settlements. No more settlements until they give the Palestinians a chance to start negotiating in good faith. And it was not a surprise to me that when he returned to Israel, in less than a week, he threw in a bid to build 100 units in East Jerusalem again. They have, as Moshe Dayan long time said, we have the right, we can choose between land and peace. We choose land and let the Palestinians do whatever they want. Therefore, I'm not pessimist. I'm not optimistic about what's going to happen in the future. The only time I feel optimism is when, and only when, the Palestinians could go negotiate with a little bit of position of power. You cannot go and negotiate when you have no, another alternative. As I remember, ex-deputy of the foreign ministry, he says, let the Palestinians say whatever they want, as long as they do not achieve certain objectives. One of them is the Palestinian state. I cannot look at this total picture in harmony if I were to compare it to 1947, November 29, when the partition plan was adopted by the United Nations. Here is a country, 93% was owned by the Palestinians and represented 2/3 of the population after, of course, the British played a very dirty role from 1917, which is the Balfour Declaration, until the 48, and where they allowed massive immigration to the country. And suddenly now things are turning around. The Jews who owned 7 or 8% of Israel, now they are almost 89 to 90%. And the Palestinians, some of them own what is left, and the rest are, of course, evicted, uprooted, thrown into the miseries of the refugee camps. I cannot accept that. I don't think a Palestinian will ever accept this. That's why the struggle, again, will be revived, because frustration of the status quo and the continuous oppression. And don't forget, Israel is not exactly a philanthropist. They're not treating the Palestinians as human beings. When you have what is called, for instance, administrative detention.
Of course not.
Administrative detention, you give the power to the police to simply, if he doesn't like someone, he can take him and put him in jail. No judicial process, just put him in jail. There are some under administrative detention up to now for almost over 16 years. I never seen in the history of mankind up to now, we're talking about 21st century, where people could be held under administrative detention for years and no freedom. So what do you expect these people to do? They're not going to send a bouquet of flowers to the Israelis. They're going to have to fight. They have no other choice.
Okay, gentlemen, if you allow me to take the second report for the evening and another look at some analysis of how foreign policy is going to look like under a Trump administration. Let's take a look.
When political outsider Donald Trump claimed victory in the U.S. presidential elections, most of the world was shocked, as no one had any idea what exactly his foreign policy agenda was, or if he even had one. This unpredictability is especially evident in the Middle East, where analysts are primarily concerned with three main issues: the civil war in Syria, the Iran nuclear deal, and the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Trump has expressed contradictory views on regional issues. Some argue that he will simply align himself with Russian President Vladimir Putin, rip up the Iran nuclear deal, and move the U.S. embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. Many analysts wonder, however, whether or not Trump will actually intervene in Middle Eastern issues. The one thing they don't debate, however, is his ability to shake things up. The Obama administration has often chosen non-intervention in the conflict-ridden region. Some blame the Obama administration for the escalation of the conflict in Syria, for not doing enough to forge a peace process between Israelis and Palestinians, and for brokering a nuclear deal with a hostile enemy, Iran. Trump campaigned on a pro-Israeli, pro-Russia, anti-Iran platform, and this is reflected in his choice of members of his cabinet and administration. As an ardent supporter of Israel, Trump announced his support for the contentious plan to move the U.S. embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, a move that could incite violence from the Palestinians. Moving the embassy could polarize the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Many believe that moving the embassy could trigger violence, as it would be a clear symbol of support for the state of Israel and would halt any possible peace negotiations. On the other hand, the Iran deal, in which the Islamic Republic agreed to limit its nuclear program in exchange for the lifting of most of the sanctions imposed on it, is hailed by some as U.S. President Barack Obama's finest foreign policy achievement, and seen by others like Trump to be one of his gravest diplomatic mistakes. The deal's supporters say that it was the best option for the Obama administration, and that it has in fact decreased the threat of Iran's nuclear program. Iran and Syria seem to be taking advantage of Obama's lame duck period before Trump takes over. This is especially evident in the recent battle for Aleppo, which resulted in victory for Syrian President Bashar al-Assad. According to analysts, Trump will end the war in Syria this year, and he will do so because of his connection with Putin. Foreign issues were not at the top of Trump's campaign agenda. Some analysts believe that he will focus most of his energy, at least at the beginning of his term, on domestic topics.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. And allow me, Mr. Sharif, to come back to you. Obviously, off the air, we were talking about how Trump could perhaps look at Russia, because that remains very murky on one point. At one point, we're seeing vows to unify with the country and to end the conflict. Syria. Then we're seeing also accusations from the Obama administration that Moscow helped Trump win the elections. And then suddenly we're hearing Trump welcome a nuclear arms race with Russia and China. So it remains very unclear how the relationship is going to look like between these two superpowers. How do you think things are going to unfold?
There is a possibility that Russia have supported Trump win the election,
right,
which is considered a bit illegal in the American system. But again, Russia and the superpowers, when we talk about Syria, it's not really an American-Russian problem. It's a universal problem. There's a lot going on there. It's more about oil fields, economics, Russian military base there. So Russia is going to do whatever it takes to have a piece of the conflict. They're supporting, and at the same time, they're prolonging the conflict. We hear this continuously in the news that they're not really doing their best to end the conflict.
right.
So America at the time being, or when Trump comes to power, this is yet to be determined, how they're going to work with Russia. So Russia right now, this is my opinion, is kind of setting the platform and maintaining normalized relationship with the new administration. Just when things are settled, they will have good relationship with the United States.
Do you see improved, Dr. Mousa, do you see improved relations with Russia under a Trump administration?
With who? You mean with the rest of the world?
No, with Russia.
No, yes, I can see that. Don't forget, the Syrian conflict was not a place of dispute between the two powers. I think what Russia did actually was implied in the implied approval by the United States, but of course almost under the table because they don't want to appear like that. Don't forget when we say that the Russians are happy with Trump because Trump is not calling for the removal of Mr. Bashar al-Assad from power.
Right.
And so did the Americans in the latest part of their interference in the conflict, and so did the Russians adopt such a position. I think, yes, the relationship will improve between the two because there are no major controversial issues that they differ about. They do not. They do not differ about controversial issues because if the Russians knew or even suspected that taking over, for instance, Aleppo in Syria, that the United States will intervene, they will not do it. So I think they have what is called the discreet approval of the United States to do or to take certain steps. Again, I come back to the major position that presidents decide in the United States exactly the foreign policy. Foreign policy is already set forth by the parties, and they sign that they will abide by this agenda.
Right.
That's why I was not so thrilled. I remember when Mr. Obama and Hillary, Madame Hillary, let's respect her, when they came to Egypt, and they gave so many promises to the Arabs, and the Egyptian newspaper applauded their approach. Settlements are illegal. Peace cannot be achieved with illegal settlements in the West Bank. The only way to get is a two-state solution, side by side, and live in peace. Not more than 72 hours passed when all these positions were turned upside down for one simple reason, because the agenda they have been elected on differ from what they claim to say. But many of these presidents say, let them hear what they like to hear, but the policy will continue. How many times they told Mr. Abbas that negotiate and we will push the Israelis? I think the pushing they made was against the Palestinians all the time.
Right. Although you say that, there's also a lot of talk about how things are going to look with Iran. Now, obviously, there was the lifting of sanctions, and there was an agreement with the United States. And now, suddenly, there's a renewal of sanctions. Trump threatens to tear up the nuclear agreement with Iran. How do you think things are going to look with that particular country?
Well, I think this issue has focus and spotlighted the influence of the Congress.
Right.
Because the move to go back on the treaty, which was already signed, was adopted by the majority of the Congress. The Congress have a relationship with the Iranians unless they stop what is called a nuclear agenda. Iran is not going to stop Syria. Therefore, they put them on what is called a list, boycott, etc., in order for them to pressure the Iranians to stop doing that. However, in the final analysis, they cannot do too much from stopping the Iranians. I don't think Mr. Trump also disagrees so much with Obama when it comes to nuclear power, because he is not in love with the Iranians owning position power, because nuclear power has a monopoly by certain states, and they don't want to increase the members in order for them to be able to control the world with their position. Therefore, not too much departure from policy when it comes to the Iranian policy, but there will be, nor will there be a departure from Mr. Obama's policy when it comes to Israel and the support for the Israel, because here, when he was still president-elect yet, he asked Obama, before he leaves office, to veto. To veto what? To veto doing illegal things. They want to veto stopping the illegal things from being stopped. In other words, they want to encourage illegal acts to be committed. Illegality here when it comes to Israel defying. And
you see, when you say that, it's sort of, some people would say, well, that contradicts the fact that American policy is already set. The American administration, Obama, has chosen to not veto but abstain from the vote, whereas Trump was trying behind the scenes to sort of use the veto or to ask other countries not to vote.
Yes, but what we don't understand, the agenda is given in general. In other words, they tell we are pro-Israel, period.
Right.
Now, Obama is about 25 days away from being out of the White House. He has to move out, and therefore to move out of policy. And therefore, he's not risking that much by saying something like this. As a matter of fact, he has justified his position already to the party by telling, we have to save Israel despite itself. Netanyahu had the chance, but Netanyahu insists on proceeding in a war path that has lasted for 68 years. If you guys love Israel, I can tell the Jews, if you really love Israel, find her peace, give her peace. And how do you get her peace? They cannot, because that's why I disagree with my colleague here when he says the public are not. Yes, the public is in support, because Israel has what is called a unique democracy for the Jews. And when the Jews, they elect someone, if they were against it, believe me, demonstrations will be all over Israel, because they do have a Jewish democracy. They would have voted against them. They will not. Everybody is pro. Actually, it was voted in the Congress, 60 to 40%. That they will continue with the policy of expansionism, kicking the Palestinians, uprooting them, destroying the trees and taking over land. And somebody has to stop that. The resolution helps on the diplomatic level, but not on the actual implementation level.
Okay, Mr. Sharif, do you think that, as Dr. Mousa says, the U.S. foreign policy is already set, and that really the United States or whoever runs the country or is head of the country really just comes and implements what's already there? But some would argue differently. And the thing that has caused alarm perhaps most recently are the people that Trump has chosen to be part of his administration.
I disagree. I mean, it's set in general terms, but it's a dynamic process. Whenever there is a problem, there is miscalculations, they have to fix it. I can see this from their stand against Bashar al-Assad. They wanted him removed from power. Now they are diplomatically trying to maintain him and keep him in power, and asking for a diplomatic peace process. And there are talks that there are going to be re-elections where he will be involved in Syria. So it's not really set in stone what they do. Again, when we come to Israel, Israel is part of many countries in the so-called Middle East, they don't rule the entire show. You have to cater for Egypt, the Palestinians, the Jordanians, the Saudis. So it's not really a dictatorship in the region. There is some sort of political democracy among these countries. And at the end, nobody wants war forever. I mean, it's not really good for...
Right.
So that's my opinion.
In general, though, do you believe that Trump has the potential, the experience, perhaps, to run a country like the United States?
It doesn't matter, really. He has advisors from the top political positions in the country, the top CEOs. He just chose the CEO of ExxonMobil to run his foreign affairs. That will open many doors for him smoothly. He will communicate with the Russians, with the Chinese, with the Arabs, everybody. So the U.S. is set differently. It's not a one-man show.
Right. Dr. Mousa, do you think he knows what he's doing?
Well, first of all, I would like to redefine democracy, to tell my colleague here, there is no democracy in Israel. Democracy in a country means people are equal, regardless of color, origin, religion, especially religion. How many times have we heard about Israel demolishing homes of Jews? Never. They don't do that. They do it to non-Jews. If there is democracy in Israel, believe me, the problem of Israel and the Palestinians is finished.
But Israel also has a problem with Ethiopian Jews.
It has, but don't forget, they have different political groups that jump from the extreme.
I mean, it's not just religious segregation, it's also racial.
Racial, religious, etc. Because, for instance, a Flasher Jew is considered himself a third-class citizen.
Right.
After the Sabra Jew, who is headed by the Ashkenazi Jew. Yes, they have racial, etc. Still, under Israeli law, a Jew is a Jew, or he has certain privileges that the non-Jew, Muslim or Christian does not have. And therefore, to build into a real democracy, it means all of them are equal under the law. They cannot have democracy because democracy means Palestinians have the right to come back, implement United Nations Resolution 194, give them the right to come back, and it probably be the first one. If they vote, they might lose the elections. I'm talking about the Israelis. Therefore, they cannot be democratic. They call it, in certain aspects, Jewish democracy, but there is no such a thing. Jewish democracy means democracy for the Jews. What does it have to do with the others? While democracy transcends racial differences, transcends religious differences, in order for them to have all people are treated equal.
Right.
So I have no confidence. And what they have in the last, they're getting tougher and tougher. They enjoy more land, occupying more land, uprooting more Palestinians. And why are they against what is called the Palestinian state? This is, I think, the best chance in history for them to create what is called peace in the area by giving the Palestinians some right. They're not asking them to implement 100% of the resolutions, because if they do implement the resolutions, not many Israelis will remain there. Just some bit of some rights in order for people to live in equal democracy. They don't have the intention, nor will they ever implement it.
Okay, I thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining Dr. Mousa Shehada, senior political analyst and former president of the Arab American Congress for Palestine. It was a pleasure. Mr. Sharif Al-Hilwa, political analyst, thank you very much for coming. Right, ladies and gentlemen, that's all the time we have for this edition of the Daily Debate. I'm Nancy Sarah Barakat signing off. Thank you very much, gentlemen.